Hey guys, alright? Welcome everyone. In April 2008, the Reaper virus rapidly spread through Glasgow, killing thousands within the first week. The United Kingdom immediately implemented martial law and closed the borders to contain the outbreak. People were ordered to stay home, but many headed to the border hoping to escape the quarantine imposed on Scotland. When the army found an infected man in the crowd, they killed him, spreading his blood to others. The crowd became enraged and fought against the soldiers. In response, the army fired indiscriminately into the crowd. The soldiers soon headed for the border before it closed. The crowd pursued them, but the gates were shut before civilians could enter. Not far from the border, Catherine Sinclair sees some soldiers boarding a helicopter, so she runs towards them and pleads for them to take her daughter, Eden. She hands them a piece of paper with their address so the child knows where to find her one day. Scotland was isolated from the rest of Britain after the borders were closed. Those who remained within the quarantine zone were left to die, so they had no choice but to feed on rats, dogs, and eventually each other. Soon, the lights within the quarantine zone went out, indicating that everyone inside had perished. Britain eventually plunged into poverty after other governments treated it the same way it treated Scotland. 27 years later, Major Eden Sinclair leads an attack on a ship belonging to a slave trader named Richter. Sinclair and Michelson infiltrate the ship and split up while Richter conducts a deal with an interested party. A shootout ensues when Richter's crew member spots Michelson. Suspecting a trap, Richter and his accomplice kill the buyers. Michelson shoots the accomplice as she flees with the buyer's gold. Richter suddenly emerges and captures him, so Michelson has no choice but to drop his weapon. Around the corner, Sinclair hears Richter's voice, so she tosses her synthetic eye down the hallway to assess the situation on her wristwatch monitor. Soon, Sinclair emerges, aiming a gun at Richter as she slowly approaches them. Richter threatens to shoot Michelson and tells her to back off, but Sinclair keeps advancing. As Richter backs away, he accidentally shoots Michelson, so Sinclair kills him. Later, Homeland Security Chief Bill Nelson approaches Sinclair as she looks at the note her mother left her 27 years ago. After reinserting her synthetic eye into its socket, Nelson asks what happened to Michelson, so she pulls a disc from her wristwatch and suggests he watch the recording. When Nelson inspects Sinclair's note, she laments that she no longer remembers what her mother was like and that she can never go to the address written on the paper. Nelson warns her that she will end up ruining her life if she works too hard, so he advises her to rest. The next day, the police conduct a routine drug operation in an abandoned building but are alarmed to find a room full of people covered in wounds and injuries. Later, Michael, a high-ranking government official, informs Prime Minister John that the Reaper virus is spreading in London. John soon calls a meeting to develop a plan to contain the disease. Jane Harris recommends putting London under quarantine. John agrees, but Nelson warns them that there will be chaos once people see the bodies of the infected piling up in the streets. After the meeting, Michael shows Nelson satellite photos from 3 years ago showing people on the streets of Glasgow. Michael concludes that these people must have survived because they found a cure for the Reaper virus. Michael asks Nelson to find someone to lead a team of agents tasked with retrieving the cure. Soon, Nelson brings Sinclair to meet Michael. Before Nelson leaves, Sinclair hands him her mother's note and asks him to take care of it. Michael instructs Sinclair to find Dr. Marcus Kane's laboratory, who was the lead researcher on the virus when Scotland was quarantined. Michael says that Sinclair and her team will have only 46 hours to retrieve the cure and get out as London will be destroyed. If she and the others stay, they will be left to die. Residents of London begin to panic after John declares martial law. When John seeks advice from Michael suggests letting the people die because there is a high chance the infection will reappear if they save a large number of people. Soon, Sinclair arrives at the border and meets the team composed of sharpshooters, tank drivers, and 2 doctors. Not long after, the agents leave the border in 2 armored military transports. Moments after entering Glasgow, Chandler, one of the drivers, hits an animal on the road. When they light a flare to investigate, they discover hundreds of cows feeding on the grass. As they continue their journey, Dr. Talbot plays a recording of Kane when he was reporting to the government about his situation during the quarantine. Sinclair learns from the archives that Kane and some soldiers hid in the hospital and regularly reported to the government until the power ran out. In the recording, Cain notes that people started feeding on each other when they ran out of food. He feared they would soon die because their barricades wouldn't last long. Upon arriving at the hospital, the agents accompany the doctors in search of evidence of Cain's work in the abandoned building while the drivers wait outside. Suddenly, Chandler sees a girl outside his vehicle. Sinclair tells him not to approach the girl because she may be infected, but he thinks she needs help, so he dons a protective suit and goes out. The girl faints in his arms, so Talbot instructs him to isolate her so they can examine her. Suddenly, a group of barbarians attacks the team, so they tell the drivers to prepare for evacuation. Chandler takes the girl inside the armored vehicle and places her in the isolation unit before turning on the vehicle. The team manages to kill some of the barbarians as they find a way out of the building, but more of them appear. Outside, the barbarians throw Molotov cocktails at the armored vehicles as they drive around the block to pick up their colleagues. As Chandler tries to evade the barbarians, the girl exits the isolation unit and slits his throat. The vehicle crashes into the building, and Chandler dies, but not before releasing a grenade that explodes in front of the girl. Back at the hospital, Sinclair instructs the team to get into the elevator to avoid the barbarians. Once inside, Sinclair shoots the elevator cable and tells the shooter to activate the foam grenade to protect them from the impact as the elevator falls to the ground floor. Corporal Red, the other driver, goes to the hospital garage to fetch the team. Soon enough, the team arrives and boards the armored vehicle while firing at the barbarians chasing them. As they flee, a barbarian with a crossbow shoots an arrow towards the armored vehicle and hits Reed's throat. With no driver at the wheel, the vehicle crashes into a car and overturns. The group exits the vehicle and finds more barbarians running towards them. Sinclair and Miller provide cover while Sunley tends to Talbot's wound. After bandaging the wound, Sinclair runs into the alley to join Sergeant Norton. Miller's gun jams, so he tries to confront the barbarians in hand-to-hand combat, but they quickly overpower him. Sinclair eventually runs out of ammunition, so she has no choice but to surrender. Sunley and Norton flee through the alleys while the barbarians surround Sinclair and Talbot. The barbarians take Sinclair to a cell where she is beaten and interrogated by their psychopathic leader, Soul. When Soul asks where they came from, Sinclair confesses they came from the wall. Soul exclaims that he knew Cain was lying when he told them there was nothing beyond the wall. He concludes that Sinclair plans to return to the other side, so Soul demands to cross the border with her. Before leaving the cell, Soul instructs his men to keep Sinclair alive. Viper then mocks Sinclair by crushing her GPS locator with his boots. That night, Soul gathers the barbarians in the arena to celebrate their capture. After Soul throws some dishes into the crowd, they burn Talbot alive and feast on his remains. Meanwhile, Sinclair removes the broken GPS wire and uses it to free herself. Soon, a guard arrives and offers her a piece of Talbot's remains. Sinclair pretends to ask him for a drink, but when he approaches the door, she pulls the chain connected to his nose ring and forces him to unlock the door. After Sinclair kills the guards, Callie, a prisoner in the cell next door, reveals that Cain is her father, and she can help her find him if she frees her. Before Sinclair can unlock her cell, Viper comes running towards her, armed with 2 swords, but Sinclair dodges the attack. In the confusion, Sinclair manages to grab one of Viper's swords. The 2 women attempt to cut each other until Callie grabs Viper by the hair. While Callie holds her, Sinclair seizes the opportunity to cut off Viper's hand and decapitate her. As they escape the compound with Callie, Sinclair contacts Norton and tells him to meet them at the train station on Queen Street. As soon as Norton and Sunley leave their hideout, barbarians on motorcycles and a bus chase them. The 2 immediately run to the station where Sinclair, Callie, and their friend Joshua are waiting on a train. Joshua starts the train before Norton and Sunley can board it, thus forcing them to run after it while avoiding the barbarians. After Norton gets on the train, Sinclair decides to help Sunley, so she gets off the train to take down a barbarian on a motorcycle. Sunley and Sinclair manage to get on the train with Norton's help. Later, Callie observes that she can only point them in Cain's direction but won't go with them because he will kill her. Cain became paranoid since his brother, Soul, left and started a war with their father. After getting off the train, Callie leads them to an abandoned military facility that she uses as a shortcut through the mountains. When they reach the other side, they encounter Cain's enforcer, Telamon. Sinclair realizes that being captured by Telamon would be the fastest way to reach Cain, so she and Norton surrender to him while Joshua, Sunley, and Callie escape. However, other horsemen arrive to capture Sunley and Callie after killing Joshua. Telemann and his men take the captives to a medieval castle where Cain awaits them. Cain tells them that they try to remain hidden as long as possible but realizes it's only a matter of time until someone else comes looking for them. Cain reveals that there is no cure but they survived because they were immune. As authorities struggle to deal with the riots in London, an infected man breaches the British security headquarters. The man tries to kill John, but Nelson manages to shoot him. However, John realizes he is infected when he notices the man's blood splattered on his face. When Michael forces John to isolate himself in his room, he decides to blow his own head off. The next day, Cain forces Sinclair to fight Telemann in a pit. Sinclair is unarmed while Telemann wears full armor with a shield and a spear, so all she can do is kick him while avoiding his attacks. Meanwhile, Norton, Sunley, and Callie escape from their cell after overpowering their guards. The trio heads to the armory to grab explosives and weapons. In the pit, Sinclair manages to grab a gun from a guard on the balcony. After knocking Telemann down, the man gets up and tries to attack her while she's turned away from him. However, she quickly turns around and stabs the axe into his helmet. Cain orders his men to execute the prisoners, but Norton and Sunley detonate the explosives to create a distraction while they escape. Cain orders an archer to kill Sinclair, but Norton shoots the archer with his gun. The group flees the castle on horseback and heads for the military facility while Cain's knights pursue them. At the facility, the group finds a Bentley inside a crate as they search for something to aid in their escape. While Sunley refuels the vehicle, Sinclair finds a phone. Once they position the car in front of the gate, Norton presses a button to close it and prevent the knights from following them after they exit the tunnel. As they rush to the Bentley, the knights arrive and shoot arrows at Norton before he can reach the car. Norton doesn't survive, so Sinclair drives the car out through the gates before they close. On the road, Sinclair calls Nelson and informs him they retrieved the package. When Nelson passes the phone to Michael, Sinclair instructs him to track their location by the phone signal. As they head towards the border, a barbarian in a police car pursues them. While avoiding the car, a motorcycle suddenly appears in front of them and shatters the windshield. Sinclair swerves and shoots the tires of the police car, causing it to plummet off a cliff, but more barbarians arrive with Soul leading them. Sinclair reverses the Bentley and drives straight towards the barbarian convoy, so they have no choice but to avoid her. The pursuit continues after Sinclair veers and heads towards the border. Before long, Soul catches up to them and jumps onto their car. Sinclair and Sunley struggle to control the steering wheel as they fight off Soul. When another barbarian tries to enter, Sunley opens the door, hoping he'll fall, but the man holds on tight. Sinclair tries to shoot Soul, but Soul grabs the gun. As they struggle for it, the gun goes off and the bullet hits a barbarian on a motorcycle. Moments later, the barbarian hanging onto her door smashes into an abandoned vehicle and is hit by another car that's chasing the Bentley. Sinclair eventually pushes Soul out of the window, but he manages to cling to the rear of the car. Soul then climbs onto the top of the vehicle and attempts to strangle Sinclair as she drives. As they continue towards the border, barbarians on a bus block the path and shoot circular saws at them. Sinclair doesn't falter and keeps driving at high speed, so the barbarians quickly jump off the bus. Soul is decapitated when the Bentley crashes into the bus, but the occupants emerge unscathed. As they near the border, a helicopter lands on the road. Michael immediately disembarks from the aircraft and asks Sinclair for the cure, so she instructs Sunley to get Callie out of the Bentley. Sunley is reluctant, so Sinclair apologizes to Michael for Sunley's behavior and tells Michael that she understands the need for sacrifice. Michael notes that the government will be in a better position the more they allow the virus to spread. He remarks that they will only act when the virus kills all the infected. Sinclair deduces that this will make Michael a hero when he comes up with the cure. Sunley notes that they can use Callie's blood to make a vaccine, but he doesn't want to hand her over to Michael. However, Sinclair goads them into going with Michael to London because she has no sway over him. After they depart, Sinclair returns to Glasgow. Nelson meets her at the address written on her mother's note. He hands the note back to her, but Sinclair points out that she doesn't need it anymore because she now has a picture of her mother. She then hands Nelson a recording and tells him that it has all the evidence he needs to bring Michael down. Shortly after Nelson returns to London, the press gains access to the recording where Michael spoke to Sinclair about his plans to wait until the virus kills all infected people. Sinclair soon returns to barbarian territory to deliver Soul's head to them. The barbarians fall silent after she tosses the head to the ground, but soon erupt into a massive celebration, knowing they have found a new leader.